Welcome to Tabletop Talk, a unique podcast where I delve into the minds of creatives in the tabletop gaming space. I'm here to uncover their creative process and inspirations driven by my passion for understanding who they are and why they create. Normally, this is when I introduce the guest. Instead, we have a second special episode where I offer my egregiously unqualified GM advice. This is audio from a live stream I did, inspired by a suggestion from a patron. I talk about the program Notion, and if you'd like to see it in action, the link to this video is in the show notes. Moreover, I just give general GM advice. I talk about how to go from a core idea to a full scenario, how I prepare to run a scenario with no set story, only a situation and a setting, and how I organize things so I can get what I need when I need it during play. Okay, sit back, relax, figure out what your NPC wants, and enjoy my hour of opining.
Hey, this is Ross Bryant, and when I'm not playing characters who are being driven mad by chthonic deities that dwell in the dark abyssal gulfs between the stars, I'm listening to Tabletop Talk.
Well, howdy, friends and floorheads. It is a rare Wednesday evening where I'm going to do a little bit of GM advice in GM's Corner. So this all came about because one of the patrons to support the channel on Patreon, Craig Presley, reached out and started asking me questions about the Shiver Gothic game that I was running. Shiver is a game by Parable Games, and they've got an additional book called Shiver Gothic that allows you to run Gothic horror. And Craig was asking me some really good questions about how was I designing the scenarios? How did I come up with the original scenario? And then also how I would run it. So I want to kind of walk through that. So needless to say, huge spoilers for the Shiver Gothic game, because I'm going to show everything. So if you are watching and have not watched Shiver Gothic or don't want that to be spoiled for you, then you may want to wait until we finish running Shiver Gothic or you've had a chance to watch it before you watch this video. But if that doesn't interest you at all, then I think we should dive in. So I'm going to use Shiver Gothic as the example. People that watch the channel know that I often will run written scenarios or I'll run original scenarios. In both cases, though, it's surprising how similar I run them and organize them. With a written scenario, I will often use the written scenario as a starting point. In the same way that when I write my scenarios, they are a starting point for me. Long time ago, I used to figure out a 3-act structure, an arc, and a story, and I would then allow my players to engage in that story. I've abandoned that. My philosophy now is to create what really is a scenario. And a scenario consists of a look and a feel. So what kind of atmosphere do I want? What type of play do I want to encourage and support? Locations. Where is this happening? When is this happening? But most importantly, non-player characters, NPCs. I want available to me a list of NPCs, and every one of those NPCs has a want and a fear, and they're trying to do something. So I set out my atmosphere, set out my locations, my timing, and then I put all of these NPCs into play. Each one of them needing and wanting something. Each one of them having things they like, things they dislike, things they want, they don't. In theory, with my scenarios, everything would play out without the players. So NPCs would battle other NPCs. They would all try to accomplish what they want. I could grab dice and run the entire game potentially, playing each of the NPCs without the player characters coming in. But that's not fun for me. What's fun for me is to then grab a bunch of player characters, drop them into that scenario. They become the agents of chaos. And now they disrupt and they come into conflict, or they become allies with different NPCs. From there, I just follow the players and I trust the dice. So you'll notice when you watch me play, I don't roll dice as often as, or call for rolls as often as some other GMs. When I roll dice, it's going to be consequential, and we are going to follow what they say, which means if I can't afford for my players to fail a roll, because if they do, the scenario is going to fall apart or they are going to reach a dead end, probably not going to roll dice. But if failure or success is interesting, oh, thank you, Nick. I appreciate it. If the failure or success is interesting, then we might roll dice. That's not a new idea with me. It's just something that I have learned that I enjoy more as a GM. Let's talk about Where Shiver Gothic, the Echoes of Blood, which is the scenario that we're playing right now. Where did that come from? Well, I read through the Shiver. I'm a big fan of the Shiver system from Parable Games, and I read through the Shiver Gothic book. And actually, for my locals, I ran the adventure in the back of the book, and it was fine. And that is not a problem with the adventure in the back of the book. It's a very good adventure. It does a really good job of showcasing their custom setting. But what I found, and my players kind of felt this way too, is it was a little too Gothic fantasy versus like Gothic horror. So it felt like kind of like a D&D game, but with a Gothic setting, and more of a horror take. And what I really decided I want to do when I played the game on stream is I wanted a very Gothic feel. And I'm talking like Crimson Peaks, Bram Stoker's Dracula, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and Tales of Dorian Gray, that type of thing. And really, Crimson Peak is what I latched onto, which is a Tom Hiddleston movie. If you've not seen it, it's really worth watching. It's a great, just perfect, just takes so many great elements of Gothic horror and just puts it out there. It's not a perfect movie, but if you like Gothic horror, just the atmosphere and the set pieces are perfect. So I said, okay, that's what I'm going for. That's what I want. So I watched Crimson Peak again. I tried to say to myself, what were the key items, right? What were the different aspects of the game that really made it Gothic, this movie? And can I bring those elements into a game? So as I was going through and looking at it, I said, you know what? I just realized the chat was on the screen. Couple really key elements for me in that movie. A Gothic mansion, an isolated Gothic mansion. So I said, okay, I definitely want that type of thing. I want this to happen in a house, a big house, a creepy Gothic house. And I had to figure out, so that's the where. The when, I said, okay, I want this to happen in late 19th century England. So classic Victorian Gothic gaslight horror. So then I just start poking around. And I think the first thing I latched onto is, I think I want this to be a ghost story. So I said, okay, got a ghost story. I like that. Who's the ghost going to be? Well, around that time, of course, we have Jack the Ripper. So we've got the Whitechapel murders happening. I said, okay, let's have the ghost be a victim of Jack the Ripper. And that's where everything started. So now I just keep asking myself questions. And a good friend and another patron of the channel, Connell, helped me kind of flesh out a lot of my ideas, and he contributed a lot to this. So hats off to Connell for all of the help here. But that's where I got going. So as I'm Googling, I discover that Winston Churchill's father was a contemporary during that time. He was part of Parliament during the Whitechapel murders. So I said, okay, let's make this mansion owned by Randolph Churchill. So then I started looking into Randolph Churchill and what's around him. Start looking at some of the real people that were around the Whitechapel murders, the lead investigator, some of the people that were part of what really, unfolded there in 1888. So I start organizing who my NPCs are. I've identified who they are, started attributing wants and needs. I decide, okay, I want this Gothic mansion, but I don't want it in London. So how am I going to get Randolph Churchill and his wife outside of London? Let's make this a country estate down in New Forest. And Now I've got to figure out why are they coming here? And if I've got this bevy of NPCs, why would they be there? So the next kind of click that happens is, what if the Churchills every year have a Halloween gala at their country estate? Because Halloween in 1888 was kind of a centerpiece to these Whitechapel murders. There were murders that happened before, there were murders that happened after. Perfect. Halloween leans into the horror. One thing I've kind of skipped over, and I just assumed, and I shouldn't. One key thing here is, you'll know, I don't start with a system. Most of my scenarios, I have an idea and things, then I go find a system that'll support it. So I stayed with Shiver Gothic because Shivers was going to support this game. As the scenario developed, if I felt that something like Call of Cthulhu or Trail of Cthulhu, or another horror game would do a better job of supporting the type of play I wanted, I would have switched systems. I'm not committed to a system, but I do need a system that'll support this. And Shiver Gothic does a wonderful job of it, because now the next thing I was thinking, I've got some choices. What type of NPCs am I thinking about? At first pass, I was thinking kind of a Call of Cthulhu Gaslight type scenario where we have investigators, right? Maybe they are upper class people that are attending the party, normal people, and they encounter horrific horror. And then I was going through the Shiver Gothic book, and Shiver Gothic has some wonderful archetypes in there that are monstrous. So if you want your players in a Gothic horror game to play vampires or Dorian Gray or werewolves or even ghosts or spirits, slayers, monster hunters like Van Helsing, all of those archetypes are in there. So I said, okay, let's open up all of these archetypes. Mad scientist, like a Frankenstein. Let's open all of these up. Let's see what my players pick. So I've sketched things out. Next, I find out kind of what my players have picked. The players, they picked Mad Scientist. So I've got kind of a Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein. I've got an immortal, and Amy decided that her immortal would be a vampire. We've got a slayer. So I've got a monster hunter. And then last but not least, we've got a psychic, a seer, a fortune teller. Perfect. As I start laying things out, the next thing is, now I've got the premise. I know where we're going to start. I know how I'm going to get them there because they're going to be invited to this party. I have got all of the people that'll be staying at the estate for that weekend. One problem I had to solve was, how am I going to keep them there? Right. So we have to isolate them for it to be horror. So there's going to be a huge storm. It's going to take out the bridges that you have to cross in order to get to this mansion. So that'll keep them there. They're planning on being there all weekend, but as the horror rises up, what's stopping people from just hopping in a carriage and going out? Well, you can't get out. You can't get out of this abandoned or this isolated mansion.
This is the part of many podcasts where someone comes on, interrupts the show, and explains that you should consider paying for the content that you're listening to right now for free. That pitchman explains by giving $1 or more a month, you not only support the show, but you allow the show to grow and improve. Here on the third floor, we refuse to interrupt your episode of Tabletop Talk with such time-wasting pleas. We pledge never to run a spot asking you to go to patreon.com and give $1 or more a month, because supporting content creators keeps the content coming, even if there is a link in the show's description. And there is. We don't ask you to click it and become a patron. We don't waste time rambling about the benefits like early access to episodes, getting episodes without ad breaks like this, or even getting a chance to play in one of Craig's RPG sessions. Anyway, enjoy this episode knowing Tabletop Talk, despite being supported by its patrons, won't engage in such blatant appeals for support.
What's next for me is to figure out key events, things that again will happen if the players do nothing. So I just brainstorm and just write down different events that can occur. As part of that, I want each of those events either to be an effect on all of my players' characters, or I want them to be maybe specific to one or two of them, so that I've got events that will engage everybody. So there are stakes involved. As I learned about the characters that were being played, I was able to create events, and then sometimes I created new NPCs that could engage with each of these characters, create stakes, because more than just the carriage can't cross a bridge to get out of here. I need them to care. So in the same way you write a script, I need to create scenarios where, why do these characters care about this? Let's create some stakes. And I do that with different events and different NPCs. All right. So from there, I start to organize things. And I do that using a program called Notion. So let's cut over, and I need to give a quick plug. I want to give a quick plug to a good friend of mine, Sean, formerly of Gaming and BS, which was a wonderful podcast that I missed terrible. But Sean has got a great video on YouTube. So if you go to his channel, it's RPG space Sean, SEAN. And you'll find a video he has called How to Set Up Notion for Your RPG. The way I always find it is I just go into YouTube and search for Notion RPG. You can see actually my search up at the top of my screen there, and it comes up. It's usually the third or fourth video. I'm not going to teach you how to use Notion. Sean does an amazing job of teaching you how to use this program. So I highly recommend, if the tool that I'm using, and you don't have to use Notion to do this, looks cool to you, I highly recommend you watch this video by Sean. It's a fantastic video. It's just over an hour and it's packed. The main feature I like in Notion is what's called the board view. And what the board view allows me to do is create different categories. Those are my verticals. And then essentially little index cards that cover all of the different things that I've been talking about. I have this board up on my screen while I'm running the game, but I also use this board to help organize all of my thoughts. So you see, I've got kind of an Act 1, Act 2. This is going to be events that are happening at the very beginning, events that are happening in the middle. And again, this is if the players do nothing, this stuff is going to unfold. It's possible that some of these events that I have listed in Act 1 and Act 2 may not happen because of the actions of the players. They may foil that in that process. So speaking of Craig Presley, I see, Craig, you got something in chat. So what is it about Shiver that allowed you to use it as a system? Good question, Craig. Great name, by the way. There's several things in Shiver that I really like. One, mechanically, Shiver is very streamlined. It is built from the ground up to tell horror stories. So the mechanics in it, just like Call of Cthulhu is built to tell horror stories, Shiver is built to tell horror stories. Could I have run this using GURPS? Yes, but I like a system that supports a specific type of play. It had the archetypes already for me in the Shiver Gothic. So knowing that Amy wanted to play a vampire, I've got it all there. We've got the tech tree for her, the skills and the abilities that she can pick from. One of the secret things that I really, really love about Shiver in general is Shiver has got what's called a doom clock. So I want you to imagine a clock with a 12 o'clock, 15 minutes after, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, right? So there's 4 major north, south, east, west points on this clock. And there's several ticks, they call it minutes, between each of those events. There's things mechanically that can cause the doom clock to click. Failed fear rolls, certain special abilities will cause the doom clock to click. Rolling what's called a strange symbol on your dice when you fail anything will click the clock. What I do is, and this gets into really, this is why it fits my style, is before you start playing, you have to decide what's going to happen when they hit 15 minutes. At 15 minutes, things are going to get a little worse. So once they get to quarter after, things are going to get a little worse. Once it gets to half past, once we're halfway through the doom clock, things are going to start to get bad. like it's going to get bad. When it gets quarter of, we're almost done. So we are well into, if you think of it as a movie or a story, we're well into the end of Act 2, right? Where the chips are down, the spit's hitting the fan, like things are not going well. And then if they tick that and they don't, quote unquote, solve or resolve this scenario by the time it gets to midnight, if they tick the entire doom clock, barring something incredible, they're probably not coming out of this. Or if they're trying to save the world's going to end. And what this doom clock does, Craig, is it creates this unbelievable tension. When I read this, I'm like, this is cool. I like how this works. But when I ran it on the channel, I did a thing called Camp Carnage. You can go check it out on the channel, which is where I took Shiver, but did kind of a Friday the 13th Halloween slasher scenario. So a bunch of kids go to an abandoned summer camp, and there is a slasher there, and they have to survive it. Watching my players react to that ticking doom clock, it does everything I want in horror. It created this tension. It made every roll matter, because if you're rolling to see if you find something or to take a swing at somebody and you fail that roll and one of those strange symbols come up and that clock starts ticking, or your one of the character classes uses a special ability and they know it's going to tick the clock. It's fantastic. So yeah, Craig, I don't know. For whatever reason, Shiver gives me a really nice sweet spot for it. They just, I'm a member of their Patreon, Parable Games' Patreon, and they put out a mini expansion for exorcisms. And now I want to run an exorcist scenario. But anyway. All right. So back on track. I now have my scenarios. I've got them organized, right? So you can see I've got my Act 1. So the first thing I have in here is my intro. This is how I'm going to start the game. I've got not a script, but I've got bulleted points that I want to hit. So as I'm interacting and kind of starting the scenario, I've got little points that I want to make sure I use. Something that I've started doing since I used this is Notion allows me to highlight things. So for example, on this fourth item, gentlemen in top hats and tails mingle with the ladies in elegant gowns. So this is me trying to set the mood of what got the Victorian age. What I can do in Notion is I can highlight different words. And when you're running the game live, it makes me real easy for me to just quickly look and kind of on my next point, I want to make sure I talk about the gentlemen in top hats, blah, blah, blah. Here, so intro, this is how I'm going to start everything off. And it's going to finish with putting the players either in a position to role play or in a position to act. So the next event that happens is they're coming in on a carriage. Here you can see I use my highlights. I know that one of the wheels on this carriage, while they're in the middle of this forest on the way to the mansion, is going to break. So I set the scene, the wheel breaks, and then I follow my players. I follow them through their actions. So that's like a little mini set piece, is that they're on an abandoned road, the wheel breaks. Now, again, I've got NPCs all acting already. Everything is happening outside. People they've never met before are doing things, trying to accomplish things. So if for some reason my players decide to set up a tent and camp that night in the middle of New Forest instead of figuring out how they can get to the mansion, stuff's going to happen at that mansion, whether they get there or not. And I have, I'm keeping track of that because I understand and know my NPCs. So then I have them arrive at the estate, and I've got some key things I want to make sure I hit on, some key descriptors, words I can use to describe the mansion. They're greeted by Lady Churchill is going to be the next big event. Then I get into the party, and I've got different events that happen after that. The whole time following players as we go. I'm going to show you the NPCs here in just a second. Couple other another question. How do you keep yourself organized during unscripted NPC engagements and unexpected behavior of the players? I'm going to show that in a second here. So if I scroll over to the right, here you can see I've got my list of events, right? So these are things that I can just grab at any point. So they're not in a sequential order, right? So I've got some events listed in my Act 1 and Act 2. And those are going to kind of happen, as the story progresses. These events are things that I can just pull out at any point. So one of them, this just recently, if you're caught up on it, one of them I put in there is staff removed crosses. So at some point, if I think things are lagging, I can have one of the NPCs notice that all of the crosses in the mansion are missing. Something that has not come up. I have not used this. All the plants in this mansion are dying, right? So it's little things. I've got a waltz dance contest, right? So I can say, now is the part of the party where there's going to be a dance contest. And, these are things that I can grab and use. And I might have 10 or 15 of them. And I may only use like 3 or 4, but they're always there. So they're always off to my left. Very quickly, this is all organized in Notion. And again, you don't have to use Notion to do this. When I'm running this type of stuff for my locals up here on the 3rd floor, it's live, right? And I use note cards. So I use the equivalent of note cards. I've got them organized in stacks. I've got my NPCs. I've got my Act 1, Act 2. I've got my events that I can pull out. I've got that all organized in front of me so I can pull them out. Gale Quest, regarding these events, do you prepare them for a single gaming session or for a longer campaign arc? I now create events regardless if it's a one-shot or if it's going to be a campaign. And if the campaign is a really long campaign, I might add more events to it, right? Because again, my agents of chaos, my players are changing the world and the world is reacting to it. So there may be events that I have not thought about, but there might be little seeds that get dropped. Maybe there's an NPC that they interacted with or something that they didn't do and that happened off screen. And maybe I need to create another event to throw into my stack that shows the ramifications of what they did or did not do. So this event list will be updated periodically. I always look at it as I prepare for my next session. It's funny you say that, Gale Quest makes a thing. This feels like agile DMing. Very much so. I'm a former programmer and very, very interested, very, very used to agile. You're going to see the way I organize it has got a little bit of my old days as a programmer there. Okay. Here's my stack of NPCs. And you can see that I have got, it looks like I've got almost 20 NPCs. They are about 20 to 30% of the way through the game right now. They have just ticked the quarter mark on the Doom clock. They've met less than half of these NPCs. It's possible that there's going to be NPCs in the list that they'll never meet. And that's fine. But again, almost in the same way I've got events, I've got these NPCs here, but some of these NPCs were created after, or their motivations were changed after my player characters made their characters. So I knew Lord Randolph Churchill was going to be part of this, right? This is Winston Churchill's father. Did a bunch of research on him, found an actual picture of him, decided again, what is his, you see, I've got goals and objectives, right? What is he trying to accomplish here? What is he afraid of? What are some key relationships? I've got a quick link here embedded so I can go to his wiki if I need to at any point and look at it.
Hello, my name is Sam Dunewald, and I'm here to tell you about Dice Exploder, my tabletop RPG design podcast where each week I take a single game mechanic and break it down with a friend. Come listen to me talk to Alex Roberts about love and pity, John Harper about elegance and layout, and Mikey Ham about, what else? Exploding dice! It's Dice Exploder, breaking down RPG design one mechanic at a time. Find it wherever you get your podcasts.
Brian, who's playing the Slayer, he made the decision, hey, I want to have previously worked for the Churchills. Now, the Churchills were always going to be a part of the scenario, but now I've got a player who used to work for them. So suddenly they become an anchor for him. They become part of his stakes. And if you watch me play Shiver Gothic, I make a point to really play into how much he cares about this family, especially the kids, one of them being Winston Churchill, who's like 14 at this point. I have a scene that I pulled out from my events where Winston really has a moment of like wanting to play hide and seek with my Slayer. This is creating stakes. So if at some point Brian's character says, let's get the hell out of here, is he going to leave this Winston family there? I knew there was going to be another murder, that somebody was going to be possessed by the ghost and was going to murder somebody somebody very specific. Hadn't figured out who that was going to be until I found out that Brian's character was going to have their anchor NPCs, the NPCs that are creating stakes for him. Then I was going to like, oh, then it's got to be Jeannie, right? That is Lord Churchill's wife, who's, by the way, super interesting lady. If you get a chance, go to her wiki. Very interesting woman. I got a ton of great ideas by researching who she is. And you'll notice as I can click on any of these NPCs and I'm going to get some key items, their goals. I'm going to get a picture. I used to share pictures with my players, but I don't do that anymore. What I do is I use them for myself. So if they're encountering Jeannie here, I've got a picture and I could, I've got something to reference myself as I, describe her. So it helps me like pull descriptors out because I'm looking at a reference for myself, but I want my players to build their own picture of who Jeannie Churchill is. So for my Slayer, it was the Churchills. That's who was going to be. So my next challenge was going to be my Seer. So Naomi is playing a fortune teller, a psychic. So I created, I don't know if I created her, I elevated her. So I already knew I was going to have a seance that occurs in the scenario. And I'd kind of decided we'll have a medium there. Maybe she's the real deal. Maybe she's not. But when I found out that I was going to have another psychic, another person who does fortune telling and does seances, I elevated Seraphina Leclerc and made her a much bigger deal. And I just watched Naomi's character just latch right onto her. And, whether she's the real deal or not, I made it clear she was kind of the fortune teller to the elite. And she became an anchor for Naomi, which was just really wonderful to see. So that covers both of her. Next, and this gets into another thing. I wanted this to be a ghost story, but I also, Jack the Ripper is the Whitechapel murders are dominating London at this time. And I wanted this potentially to be the first 10 sessions of potentially a long campaign. When we are done with this Shiver Gothic season on the show, they are going to figure out that there's much bigger things in play here than just this scenario of what's happening in this mansion. And I will be planting seeds all the time for things for season 2 that could happen in London when they realize what the larger potential plot that's happening. And part of that is like super spoilery, right? So again, if you've not watched the Shiver Gothic, you don't want it spoiled for you, please stop listening because I'm getting into some deeper stuff here. There's a vampire at this gala, and he is part of a cabal of vampires that is responsible for these Ripper murders. There is not a Jack the Ripper. There's different people that are committing these murders. And I have decided this is a blood ritual to prepare London for the arrival of Dracula. Because it turns out Bram Stoker's Dracula is also concurrent here as well. So I'm saying these are ritualistic murders that are occurring. And there is a secret society that is doing this. Some of them are vampires, some are not. Some are thralls. Some of them are trying to be part of this elite group. Some of them don't even know why they're doing it. All right. It's just some sort of this weird Masonic thing. But what I'm going to do is plant the seeds, and I'm going to leave my players at the end of season 1. Maybe there'll be a season 2 and maybe there won't be. I don't know. But they're going to know that there is an ancient vampire coming from Eastern Europe to London. And these ritual murders are because of that. And they need to continue. The ritual is not done. So I set them up to go back to London, try to stop this blood ritual that's preparing London so that Dracula can arrive and, be powerful when he is. So this gets me back to my next anchor. So I've got now a vampire player, my immortal, played by Amy. And I knew I was going to have a vampire here. In fact, it turns out this ghost story thing is kind of like the first threat. The bigger threat is the plan that Sir Blackwood has. So Sir Blackwood is a powerful vampire, and the investigator who is investigating these murders, who was the actual real investigator, Frederick Aberline, he's at this party as well. And he's getting a little too close to figuring out that there isn't one murderer. And he needs to get power over him and leverage him and get him off of this. So his plan is to actually bite his wife. So he is at this party with one goal, which is to turn Frederick Aberline's wife into a thrall so that he can keep track of what's happening in this investigation and potentially influence it, or even potentially take Aberline out or threaten Aberline via his wife. So the big plan that's happening just in this mansion here is we've got one main antagonist, and that is Sir Blackwood, the vampire, who is very, very powerful, very regarded and loved in high society, a close friend of the Churchills. His plan is to isolate this woman. First of all, figure out how close Aberline is to all of this, isolate his wife, and then turn her. But I knew that I could use this vampire as the anchor for the creating stakes for Amy's character, who is also a vampire. So he has revealed himself much earlier in this scenario than he would have if her character was not her character. If there was not a vampire as a player character, I wouldn't have revealed who he is yet. But now he creates a wonderful anchor. And Amy, because she's an awesome player, she's grabbed onto Sir Blackwood. And she wants to figure out what the hell is going on with him. And she's now got stakes. She now has motivations. And I think that's really important is for there to be a group stakes, things that matter for the group, for all four of them. Why are we here? Why are we doing this? Why are we poking the bear in this scenario? Why are we engaging in these conflicts? What are we trying to resolve? But it's also, I think, good with events and with NPCs to create personal stakes and personal connections and reasons. You see me do it in my Forbidden Lands games. You see me do it in my Mothership game. A lot of the games I run now, you're going to see this technique I use along. It's not new to me. It's not original to me. One small tip. I watch a lot of YouTube videos and listen to a lot of podcasts about screenwriting. And if you're a GM, they are gold. Listening to writers who write movies and TV shows talk about the techniques they use, because it is the same techniques as you're creating scenarios and running games. Even if you're running a written scenario, you learn about stakes, you learn about conflict, you learn about scenes and what the elements of scenes are, and how you keep things moving forward, and you prevent things from stalling. So if you don't listen to podcasts or YouTube videos about screenwriting, I highly recommend it. So I've got an anchor for Amy. I've got my mad scientist. Dika is playing a mad scientist, a Dr. Frankenstein character. And I struggled for a good bit of time trying to figure out what was I going to give her to latch onto. I ended up creating two NPCs that are outside of all of the shit that's going on, right? They have nothing to do with the Whitechapel murders. They have nothing to do with the vampire, with the inspector. They have nothing to do with any of this. And it is, and this I took right out of Crimson Peak, out of that movie. the movie, Tom Hiddleston, and I can't remember the other actor who plays his sister. That it's a wonderful relationship. They're twins. Kind of lifted that and created another mad scientist. But unlike Dika's character, who's more into the biology of mad science, this twin, he is more into, William is more into, electricity and ethereal type stuff, more mechanical going. But I made his sister a changeling, a fey changeling. And Dika has now figured that out, Dika's character. So again, now she has stakes. Where that storyline is going to go, the little side story, I don't know, but we're having a ton of fun with it. It gives Dika's character something to engage with that's just outside of out of all of that. So that was a long explanation. The recap is here for what I've covered so far. Decide what your setting, look, and feel is going to be. Find the game that's going to support that. Come up with some core concepts, some goals that you want for the game. I want my players to experience this, to have touchstones like I have the touchstones that I've talked about, Crimson Peak being the big one. And then start building events and NPCs that are going to live in this world. And again, if the players never engaged, they never showed up, this would all play out, right? The events at this gala, this weekend gala, would play out whether they showed up or not. Just recently, I had Lady Randolph Churchill kill another NPC. That was going to happen whether they did something or not. Then create your toolbox. NPCs that you've got available to you that you can pull in to the game at any point in time, especially from a timing standpoint or a momentum tempo standpoint. Things start to lag down a little bit. Go grab yourself an NPC and inject them into the game and have them kind of push the characters forward if they're stalling out. Same thing with the events. Have a list of events that are set again, whether these events there's events that are going to happen, whether they do anything or they don't do anything, but another basket of events that can happen anywhere and happen at any time. And you can just grab them and include them in there. I'm going to catch up on the chat real quick. Agile DMing needs to be a thing. Good book title. Definitely. Did that emerge as you were developing the game, or did you start from that and work backwards? Craig, I've ended up running my mouth so long since you wrote that. I'm not quite sure what you're talking about, but just generally speaking, both things happen. Some things are created as I'm moving forward. Oh, the Dracula. The Dracula happened before the player characters were created, and that was pretty early. I knew I was going to have Dracula pretty early. So what I wanted to happen is I wanted a kind of a small threat. Think of it as kind of like the end of Act 1, start of Act 2 threat. The initial threat right now, rightly so, the characters likely think this is the main threat, is this ghost. I wanted a bigger threat that reveals itself if they do or don't resolve the ghost. And that was going to be me figuring out who is, because there's a little bit of time where I was going to have Jack the Ripper be at the party and decide who Jack the Ripper was. Then I went, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to define who Ripper is. And then I got the idea of what if it is multiple people? What if it's a secret society? Why would they be killing these women? Came up with the blood ritual idea. Quickly ran, because I'm a huge fan of Bram Stoker's book, and just said, please, please, please be about this time. This happens about 6 or 7 years before Dracula arrives in London. And Harker has not gone to Transylvania yet to meet with Dracula. So this is happening several years before the events in Bram Stoker's Dracula. But I've got 2 NPCs on my list that are from Bram Stoker's Dracula that I can pull in. So to answer your question, Craig, that was pretty early. Couple other tips. Again, organize and get everything in front of you, but be flexible. Be ready to follow your players. It's incredible. You create a scenario, you create conflict, you create stakes, You give yourself the tools to understand what do these NPCs want? What are their goals? What's going to happen if my players do nothing? And then give yourself the tools to then be able to inject this stuff into the game as you're running it. Follow the players. Make sure you're reacting to your players. One thing I'm a big believer in is the choices your players make have to matter. And the way they matter is that they are poking at this world that you have created, and the world needs to poke back. And there has to be reactions to their actions. If that is not the case, then they're going to feel like they're watching and not playing. I think that is extremely important. Extremely important. A lot of times people get uncomfortable. Some GMs are uncomfortable with this because they're like, well, I don't know if I'm going to come up with ideas as I'm going. I'm not real creative. I have a hard time coming up with improv and things on the spot. I get that. I'm not by any means am I great at that.
This is Sean. You may have heard of me from such movies as Brett and Sean Go to Illinois, 2 Motorcycles, 1 Stick of Dynamite, and Gaming and BS. What kind of RPG podcast is that? After my NFTs were stolen, I decided to become a patron of Third Floor Wars. The content is great and it costs me less than a good shot of liquor. So consider becoming a patron. It may just land you your next big role. Head over to patreon.com/Third Floor Wars. Tell Craig Sean sent you.
What I've done, though, is I've learned to play with them. So before we started playing this and I set my list of NPCs, I spent a lot of time with these NPCs. And when we're playing, I put myself into that NPC and I play them as if they were my character on my character sheet. And again, when I go to each of these NPCs, they have wants and needs, and I can push for that. And that is, I'm not doing any more improv as a GM than I would be if I was playing the game. I'm acting and I'm reacting. And if you can put yourself there, if you can create enough of a, I hate the word for role playing, but I can't think of a better one. If you can immerse yourself in the game the same way you want your players to be immersed in the game, and to act and react as if you were playing this scenario as well, but you have several player characters, you don't have one, it makes it play out easier. But I'm also don't just have the NPCs. Like I said, I have the as well. In the chat, I appreciate that you don't typically use a lot of maps in your games. Do you find that using a lot of maps squelch the game experience? I don't use maps anymore. And so talk about progression. I used to be like, if you go back and look at high school, college, Craig GM, I used battle maps, miniatures. For me, role play, a big facet of role playing was the tactical nature of role playing. And it allowed me to create space and a sense of place. Now I find it too limiting. One, I don't have any tactical combat in my games. You notice I don't run D&D. I think I've played D&D once on the channel. But even then we didn't use battle maps. I like Theater of the Mind better. That is not the better way to play. It's the way I like to play. And I need a system that can support Theater of the Mind, right? So if you go and look at the games that I run on this channel, it's not Pathfinder, it's not D&D, because I think you really do need a map in order to use that. But, if you go and look at like Mothership and Forbidden Lands and things like that, you don't need battle maps for that. And again, to be very clear, nothing wrong with that. If I want tactical gaming, I'm a miniature gamer as well, right? I'll go play Marvel Crisis Protocol or Malifaux if I want to do tactical gaming. RPGs are a different experience for me, and I don't need that in my RPGs. But for some people, that's what this hobby is, and hats off, just do it. One of the big changes, though, I think that's even more interesting to me than me giving up battle maps and taking things off of a grid and limiting myself to that space. So one thing about battle maps that I don't miss is battle maps I have found. I thought what they were doing was giving a better sense of immersion for my players and a better sense of space, I should say, for my players. What I found out is that they were actually limiting my players. If I say you're in a tavern and a brawl fight comes out in the tavern, Steve, what are you going to do? I found players will look at the map and go, well, there's a table over here, or I see that there's a barrel there. And that's because I've defined the space for them. Now imagine that I don't. I give them a sense of space. I give them enough description to put them there. But I want them to finish it, right? So I might draw the lines. I want them to color in the picture. And when I say, Steve, it's your turn, Steve can go, there's a barrel over here, right? And if that doesn't grossly clash with the reality of the fiction that we have been playing in, that, yeah, there's a barrel right there. And Susan says there's a chandelier and I want to swing off of that. And I don't know if Susan would have thought of that if we were using a battle map and I didn't have a little icon saying there's a chandelier. So that's one thing that's big for me. But one of the other big changes that has happened for me is because I'm a visual person, I used to have pictures. If you go look at some of my GM videos for Star Wars, I create like mood boards at that point in my GMing career where I was creating like just visuals that my players could look at. So I was describing the scene and it was kind of a mood board of people and places and things that kind of give them a sense and a feel for that. I've abandoned that. If they encounter an NPC, you saw that let me bring up another NPC here. Like here's Chief Inspector Aberline. I have a visual reference because I'm a visual person. And I will use this when I'm describing Aberline to my players. But I want them to picture Aberline. And yes, among my 4 players, the visual they have of Aberline is going to be slightly different among the 4 of them. And we might encounter a situation where there's a reality clash in there. We'll solve that when it happens. But I have realized, and again, doesn't make it right. This just is what works for me. I think that if you give your players just enough to start their wheels turning, the picture that they're going to come up with in their theater of the mind in their heads is going to be far more vivid than me trying to build it and put it into their heads. I'm still playing with this, and I feel like it's something that I need to continue to get better at. But it's something that I've become a huge proponent of, is giving my players enough to understand a sense of place and a sense of time. And I don't mean just like 1888 time, but like minute to minute time, but really allow them to take it further and to grab what I give them and run with it. And they're influencing each other's fiction as they're describing things, as they're acting and, saying that there is a chandelier in the tavern. I think that's about it. And Craig, I hope this helps. I really appreciate you asking the questions and putting it out there. I do see that there's been some comments from YouTube. I can't see them on my screen. I will go back and I will look at those comments and try to answer them. But for those of you that are watching this not live, if you're watching this on YouTube later, if you've got questions, thoughts, or anything, please put them in the comments. One of the things that I'm trying to be very, very good about is answering comments and answering questions that are commented in my video. So by all means, go down and leave a comment. If you have a thought or an opinion, if you think this is the worst way to do things, let me know that. Or if there's some other things that you have questions about, please let me know. I like to do this type of stuff, and a lot of the ideas for my GM advice videos come from patrons. So big thank you to you, Craig, for the questions that led to this video. But for those of you that are interested in supporting the channel, you can go to patreon.com. You can search for Third Floor Wars. There should be a link in the video at the bottom as well. And for $1 a month, you can support us. We have an amazing community on our Discord where other patrons are interacting with each other. One of the things that makes me so happy is that there are games happening on the Discord now. So supporters of the channel are finding each other and running games for each other. We've got games of Mothership. We've got Impossible Landscapes, Delta Green being run for patrons on there, not by me, but by other players. I was stuck in Tampa for work last week, and I spent the whole evening at a restaurant watching patrons on the Discord playing Impossible Landscapes, and it just made me so happy. All right. That's it, kids. Thanks so much. And I really hope this was helpful. Let me know in the comments if it was. Take care. Thanks for listening. Did you get any good tips from this episode? I'm dying to hear your thoughts. Please share your thoughts on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or Blue Sky, or email me at admin@thirdfloorwars.com. Your voice matters, and all those links are in the show notes. Please take a minute to rate, review, and share this podcast. Word of mouth is the key to growing tabletop talk. I promise the next episode is my talk with Matt John about the newest Conan RPG crowdfunding soon. Happy gaming, friends. Remember what Henry Matisse once said: don't wait for inspiration. It comes while working. Get up and make. You are a creator. Hey, are you still here? Look, the podcast is over, and you sat through all of the breaks and bloopers? Well, I mean, if you're here, you might as well run over to patreon.com and become a supporter. Don't forget to rate and review this podcast, too, while you're at it, on whatever platform you're listening to. I do appreciate you sticking around. Take care.